In 2004, Matt Hoover was overweight. He watched the first ever season of the big hit show, The Biggest Loser, from his couch, with a bag of chips on his gut and a beer in his hand. At the time, he weighed 339 pounds. During an interview, Matt says he made fun of season 1 contestants who cried on the scale. He made fun of them for being sensitive, for caving to the pressure. But when he became a contestant on season 2, he cried more than anyone. Matt cried like a baby. His words, not ours. Matt Hoover worked hard, and he showed determination and grit. As an ex-wrestler who had won 2 state championships, Matt knew what struggle was. He knew how to put in the time and the reps. And by the end of season 2, Matt stepped on the final scale at 182 pounds, winning the title of the Biggest Loser and the grand prize of $250,000. Even sweeter, Matt met and married a fellow contestant, Susie Preston, who he fell in love with on the show. And together, the two hit the talk show circuit to celebrate their new bodies and their new love. Today, Matt weighs 237 pounds, and he's distanced himself from the talk show circuit. Susie weighs 175 pounds and says she's continuing her weight loss journey. These are two contestants who had every incentive in life to keep the weight off, yet they just couldn't manage it. But we're not here to turn our backs on Matt and Susie for failing in their weight loss goals. In fact, on the Reengineered You, we're going to do the opposite. We are here to find answers. You're listening to the Reengineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to get through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet and get to the juicy facts.
So what can we learn from Susie and Matt Hoover? Today we're looking at a study that came out after our power couple won their season. In fact, the study we're looking at comes from season 8 and the National Institute of Health. And we're hoping to answer some of your biggest questions in weight loss and dispel a few bloated myths about weight loss that we just can't seem to shed. Myth 1. Weight loss is just a simple equation. Burn more calories than you put into your body. Simple, right? So what's the big fat deal, America? Myth 2. If fat people won't get into shape for their own sake, then it's perfectly okay to call them out for their eating habits, right? Myth 3. After you've dialed the weight off, the rest is just maintaining a steady calorie intake, correct? So when Matt and Susie gained their weight back, it just proved they didn't have the willpower in the first place. At least these are the misconceptions our 90-pound grandparents shame us with during Thanksgiving dinner, and we are going to bust them. But first, I'd like to tell Joe about the time I had a close encounter with one of the Biggest Losers and how it got us thinking about weight loss.
So when we started looking for narratives for our weight loss episode, we kind of had a blank spot. And then Todd was telling me Biggest Loser. He mentioned that he had some connection to the Biggest Loser. And I'm sorry to admit this, but I don't watch that show. So Todd, how did we land on this? Why did you force me into looking up Biggest Loser statistics?
Well, I never missed an episode of this show. It's 9 seasons, but I know all the trainers' names. I've read their books. I'm very involved in it. But I used to work out in a gym in South Seattle, and I'm walking on the treadmill one day, and I look to my left, and I see this heavy-set athletic gentleman, and I recognized him right off, like a friend or a professional athlete or someone famous, and I almost felt like I should go over and talk to him. I'm like, you don't know this guy, and if he's I thought he was either an ex-football player, a defensive lineman, or a UFC fighter. He had kind of the cauliflower ears, looked real tough.
So mentally, something clicked. You recognized him from somewhere.
And the reason was he won The Biggest Loser. His name is Matt Hoover. And that's where he lives. Yeah.
So this was not like a celebrity gym or something you had attended? You weren't expecting this?
This was just the $25 McDonald's gym, LA Fitness.
Okay.
And the reason I didn't go and talk and say hi, one thing, I respect his privacy, but he had gained a lot of weight back. And he looked at me, and I think he kind of saw that in his eyes, because he sees fans of the show all the time.
Oh, he must. Okay.
And they must probably say something like, oh, you've gained weight, or,
Right.
And just make them feel like garbage. But you don't know what to say, because you know you're both thinking it.
Right. I guess for most celebrities, it's, oh, I recognize you from this one thing. But if the one thing you're recognized for is accomplishing something that you no longer hold, that's got to be kind of crushing. So, of the reality shows to watch, what in particular about Biggest Loser strikes you? What do you like about this?
First things, I love all things self-help. I love biographies about rags to riches. I'm a huge gym rat. And they really do a good job of building the tension on this show with the weigh-ins at the end, and someone's going to be sent home. And we talked about this offline, but weight loss is something that we want for everybody.
Right.
We're never jealous of that. We're just happy for them.
Yeah, it's one of the very few things where if somebody accomplishes it, even if it's somebody you dislike or hate or love, or it doesn't matter how you feel about somebody, if you see somebody accomplish that, you cheer.
The real beauty to me of this show is their confidence spike. And then you see these shows, and it's not uncommon in the shows for people to lose over 100 pounds, 200 pounds. A whole person they lose in weight.
Right.
So you can think, well, what could I do in my life if I use that kind of willpower, got in the right environment?
Right. They're doing, apparently, like what we'll get to in our subject today, in our research, the toughest thing you can do, basically.
You see these contestants come in, Joe, and they are below zero. They're broken people. And you see their confidence rise, and it's really a beautiful thing. You see their very unhealthy relationship with food change to healthy. And it's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that's our subject today. Then we're going to get into The Biggest Loser, something I have never seen, something you have seen a lot, and we're going to break down the science that came out of the show.
Now, another thing on this show is the people are very vulnerable. They get up on scales and strip down to swimsuits, which has got to be hard when you're morbidly obese, to be that vulnerable and show yourself not just to your partner or the doctor, but to the whole world.
Yeah, shockingly vulnerable. If I'm on the scale, it's just, me in front of a mirror. I can't imagine having all of America looking at me.
I think you would like this show, and there's some really good science in it. One thing that I think would resonate with you is they have this test they do on this show where they take a 40-year-old and they do their blood work and check them all the way out. And then the doctor gives them, because of their overeating, because of their unhealthy lifestyle, what their true age is, not their birth date. And it isn't uncommon for people who are obese that are 42, but on the inside they're really 65.
Wow, so they're looking at like their blood panel, their lipids, their cholesterol, things like that.
And from large masses of fat can push your organs around, so it's very bad for your overall health.
Okay.
And a very wise friend of mine said to me once, and he said, "You don't see any 300-pound 80-year-olds, do you?" Right.
It's a pretty good point.
Now, Joe, you've had some weight loss. Tell me about your story.
Sure. It's mostly been the last year and a half. I won't say exactly how much. I've lost about 80 pounds so far. And
holy moly.
Yeah, pretty much all of it was just I drank a lot of beer, and of course I ate badly. But in the past year and a half or so, we're gonna get into the science, so I'm not gonna talk too much about that. But yeah, I have done a little bit of weight loss, but I went really slowly. That's something I'm going to stress throughout this episode is I did not diet, quote unquote.
And you've kept it off.
Yeah, that is the big part is I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. It was I did it really slowly with my doctors giving me a lot of advice. And I did it that way because I wanted to have a permanent change. And it just comes down to altering your environment more than it comes down to dieting for yourself.
Well, let's rewind there. What sparked the I have to do something? Was it a doctor? Was it a personal issue?
Oh, it was a personal issue. It was a doctor. I had a health complication. It was, I won't get into specifics, but it was blood pressure. It was, my blood pressure spiked up, and it had a lot of complications with it. You're talking about Biggest Losers and them checking on them, their panels and seeing how old they really are. I'm 35, and I'm betting my panels came back a little older than that, at least.
Yeah. Well, I've had my own heart issues, and Joe and I'm 10 years older than him, but we talk about cardiologists like a couple of 90-year-olds.
Right, yeah. If anyone wants to know what we sound like off the air, it's like old men playing chess in the park. That's how we talk. It's like, how's your blood pressure today?
The weather at our hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's our discussion. So we're gonna get a little bit deeper than that today, hopefully.
But then on the serious side, though, when your own mortality comes into question, it wakes you up.
Yeah, suddenly you're motivated. Suddenly it's not just, I'll think about that tomorrow. So you've done some weight loss too, haven't you?
At your age, I got divorced, and I was 50 pounds overweight, and I was very depressed. And when you get divorced, you don't just lose what you have. You got to pay for a few years to get back to zero.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted to get into shape to get a new partner and to be more competitive in the dating game.
Right.
So what I did was I went to Chipotle, ate there 3 times a day. I would get 2 margaritas and their chicken salads. And that's and I work out like a psycho. Which gave me shin splints, bad knees, hurt my back, I did it all wrong.
Okay.
The diet was wrong, the exercise was wrong, but my will was strong. So
well, that's what counts, right?
And I lost 50 pounds.
Oh, congratulations.
And look, I kept it off also.
And something we learned from the rejection episode is the online 80% of women are competing for the top 20% of men. So I bet you really had to put in time at the gym to get into that 20%.
You get the sexy bodies and
right.
Top 20.
Okay, so we're going to get into the science of it. We've teased that enough. So we're going to talk about why the American Journal of Public Health declared that obesity is incurable. And I really want to start with a little bit of a caveat or a warning here for our episode. A lot of this is going to sound like we're saying weight loss permanently is hopeless, that real significant change is maybe not difficult. I mean, some of this study makes it sound like it's darn near impossible, but we're going to start by disabusing that. We're going to say that we're going to throw some statistics at you that sound a little scary, that may lower your resolve. But keep in mind, by the end of this episode, we're going to tell you how to make significant change. So stick in with that. Don't just feel bad as we get to the science, because there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
There is, and think about the people that you know. The vast majority, who've had significant weight loss gains over 100 pounds have probably all put it back on.
Yes, and part of that isn't because of lack of will. It's not because they were broken as people. It's because as a culture, we don't look at this in the correct way. We're angled wrong. We skew toward blaming the people and not how we associate weight loss, how we look at it, how we look at the process of it. So we're going to definitely get into that, but there's absolutely hope.
And you have to get educated to win.
Perfect. The perfect way to say that. You have to be educated and self-aware. And I hate to say that that's the end message of every single episode we have. But yes, the answer is education and self-awareness. So, Todd, the statistics we're pulling from come from the American Journal of Public Health. What would you guess is the percentage of people who, once they become obese, come back to a healthy weight?
So lose the weight to healthy and then go back to obese?
Other direction. They just people who become obese and then diet back down, who eventually lose the obese weight. What do you think the percentage of that is?
40%?
So yeah, I would think it's about that high. I mean, like I would have guessed 1 in 3 when I first started this research. I figured it was. Yeah, I mean, I've met people who have lost weight after being obese, so I thought it must have been higher. But again, from the American Journal of Public Health, it's closer to about the people who fail to return to a healthy weight and maintain it. The failure rate is about 98.3% in men and 97.8% in women.
So 2% come back down.
Yes,
Two
less than 2% in men, about 2% in women.
So 98 out of 100 stay obese for their eternity of their life.
Yes, once they hit obese, they have dips that come back into healthier weights from time to time, but they basically are cemented into that weight. And we're absolutely going to cover why that is. But I just wanted to point out, this is why, according to the American Journal, obesity is now classified as incurable. And that's something that we may have talked about too. There's a very famous guy who advertised for Subway, Jared. He was their spokesmodel. We're not going to get into his horrible crimes or the jail time he's doing right now. I just want to focus on one very small point. Jared is a man who, once he lost the weight, the only thing he had to do in life to basically be a paid spokesman, to live a rich, wealthy life.
Like $1 million a year.
Yeah. The only thing he had to do in life was keep that weight off, and he couldn't.
And he got attention from everybody cheering him around. The whole world.
Absolutely. The world was on his side. So people who think that you can go obese and then come back, that you can diet back down to a healthy weight, there are people that we're looking at today in this episode, in this study, that the only incentive they have in life, the one thing they have to do to be successful in life and live, not extravagant, but comfortable lives, is to keep the weight off, and they can't do it. So this is the study we're looking at. So this is, I'm going to quote the Lancet here, because they covered this as well. Of people who use crack cocaine, 10 to 20% become addicted, whereas people who become obese, as we mentioned, 98.3% of men and 97.8% of women failed to return to a healthy weight. This from the Lancet, quote, "Once obesity is established, body weight seems to become biologically stamped and defended. Therefore, the more recommendation to avoid calorically dense foods might be no more effective for the typical patient seeking weight reduction than would be a recommendation to avoid sharp objects for someone bleeding profusely." So once you're there, once you've got that stamped into you, once you've reached obesity, telling someone who's obese to avoid bad food, it's already over. You're telling them to avoid something that has already changed their physiology pretty much permanently. So the reason for this, every show in the first section, I feel like we do the same thing. We're going to go to ancient man. We're going to look at primitive man and why we're built this way. If you can imagine yourself being starved and you're in prehistory, once you start starvation, your body has this mechanism. And it might come down to epigenetics. We haven't done an episode on epigenetics yet, but our genes are built to pretty much overcome anything. That if there's no food available to us in a part of the world we get trapped in, then our bodies will start adapting to that.
Clever and resourceful animals we are.
Yes, we are. Like we're able to basically adapt to almost any. I mean, there are humans living in Arizona, a place where you need air conditioning to go anywhere. So if you lose weight from being obese and you do it quickly, most people do it quickly within a year. Their body perceives it's being starved. This was the case for a Biggest Loser from season 8 named Danny Cahill. Now this is not the same Biggest Loser we started the episode with. We're going to come back to your man, the fellow you met or saw at the gym. The reason we're focusing briefly on Danny Cahill is the New York Times did a follow-up study for season 8 contestants. And of the season 8 contestants, basically they looked at season 8 and they said, why haven't we studied these obese people who've lost weight yet? This is a perfect opportunity for science to figure out how obesity works. One of the biggest losers on season 8 that they studied, this from the New York Times, was a man named Danny Cahill. At the end of the season, he won. He won the big prize. He was weighed in at 191, down from 430. So he lost about 260 pounds. He lost the most of any Biggest Loser in Biggest Loser history.
Like a twin brother.
Right. Yeah, he basically lost another him.
That's awesome. I mean,
yeah, the work and the amount of willpower that must have taken. I haven't watched the season, but it's an incredible amount. Now he's back up to 295. He's back to being very large, and he's restricted to eating a diet 800 calories less than a normal human male. Now, I want to put that into perspective. So when we talk about the human, the body's ability to adapt to new environments, Danny Cahill eats 1,700 calories just to maintain his weight. A normal human man eats 2,500. So remove 800 calories from your diet. That's a meal and some change if you're eating healthy. That's so much more if you're trying to diet. I mean, that's piles of vegetables and all kinds of good stuff you can't eat for that day. And that's his maintenance weight.
That's already a low-calorie diet, too. That's not an average American diet by any stretch.
Right. Yeah. It's 1,700 calories is nothing. I mean, if you go to, like, we're talking American diets, go eat a single burger at a really nice burger joint with fries on the side. That's about the same. It's going to come in at about 1,500 calories.
All day.
Yeah, all day. That's the only thing you get to eat. And people out there are going to be thinking, oh yeah, well, I could survive off of one burger a day if I just had a lot of willpower. If I had to. We're not talking had to. We're talking this is his life now, and he has to space that out. And permanent. That's something I absolutely can't stress enough. 13 out of 14 season 8 contestants regained their weight, and they went through this similar change. They all had their metabolism adjust permanently. We're on 6 years after the study started. So this isn't something where they dieted down from being obese and then their metabolism eventually bounced back to normal. All of these contestants, they now have a metabolism that takes in 300 or so calories less. They just don't need it anymore. They're they have a bear's hibernating metabolism. They're not even the same type of human as we are anymore with the amount of calories they don't need. Another contestant, Sean Alger, who was from the same season, he went back up to 450 pounds after the show. And he said, after he realized how fewer calories he burns per day, he said, quote, "It's kind of like hearing you have a life sentence." He now burns 460 fewer calories per day. So, fewer calories per day. When I first read this, at first I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, that means that's a lot less food per day that you can't have. And then I almost spun it like a bright side. Like I always try to play both sides. So say, for instance, you, Todd, if I told you your body needs 500 less calories a day than a normal man and will forever, can you see a bright side to that?
Not really. I like food.
You like food, right? My brain, because I have to try to find the positive. I started thinking, well, cool, I'm a survivalist. like now I can survive off almost nothing. My food budget will be lower.
There you go. I get that.
Yeah. So that's 500
that's a
less
stretch,
calories
but I'll
I have
give
to buy.
you that one.
Yeah. So even that bright side gets completely vanquished by this next section that I'm gonna cover. So we're gonna talk hormones now. So poor Danny Cahill eats 800 less calories a day just to maintain. Like he's gaining weight. He's eating 800 less calories a day. He's slowly gaining weight. So at a crash diet amount of food, his weight is still creeping back. Now, here's the kicker. Your metabolism will permanently change if you diet as fast as the Biggest Loser's diet. However, permanent low leptin levels after the show alter their hormones as well. So leptin is a hormone that's released from fat cells. What this hormone does is it tells your brain when you have enough energy stored up in your fat. So like your body fat, like whatever your fat content is right now, if you have a lot of fat stored up, leptin will signal the brain and say, we're good. We don't need it anymore. We're not just full. It's a more of like a low level background hormone that tells your body we have enough for the winter. We've got enough fat. When you gain weight, you basically gain fat cells. You create cells that never leave. Because when you diet, those fat cells don't disappear. Like, you don't quote unquote burn fat. That's stupid. What it actually does is it shrinks these cells down. So you create fat cells by getting fat, and then they stay there and continue signaling your brain after you lose weight because they've shrunk down and now they're hungry. Now they think you don't have enough fat to last the winter. And so when you're dieting and they shrink, they still signal for that hunger. And they took people from season 8 and they checked their leptin levels, and they found out that those clusters of hormones, they're still signaling, and they're signaling throughout the show that they are starving, that they're dying of starvation. They return to about half of what they once were once they reach a healthy level and once they sort of quote-unquote normalize after the show. So like they went home, they spent years trying to get their metabolism back. Their metabolism never returned to normal. Their leptin levels only came up to about half, which means they're still starving. Their bodies interpret this as dying.
Well, and the fat cells shrinking, not going away. I had a friend who was in Hollywood, and he said most of the lipo is done by the men. All the men who have these six-pack stomachs, they get lipo because of what you just said. It doesn't go away. So they have to take those out of their body.
I had somebody, while I was doing research, I talked to friends of family and family members who are heavy. And one of them is about to go get surgery to get excess skin and fat cells removed. And she asked, she's like, won't this take care of it? Won't removing the fat cells help? And I said, yes. But the problem that I found in these studies is that a lot of the signaling cells are actually organ fat. So you can't really remove that. No. So that's yet another dark spot on this study that I'm revealing is
they're mixed with the good stuff, the stuff we need.
Yeah. The awareness comes with a dose of there's a lot of bad news here. So I'm going to quote now from Dr. Joseph Proito from the University of Melbourne. What was surprising was a coordinated effect it is, Proito said. The body puts multiple mechanisms in place to get you back to your weight. The only way to maintain weight loss is to be hungry all the time. We desperately need agents that will suppress hunger and that are safe with long-term use.
Your hormones think they're saving us.
Your hormones think they're saving us. And it's not just leptin. There's about 4 or 5 hormones that I could read about. I didn't get into the other ones. I really focused on leptin because the articles do. That's the one most of them look at. But yes, just imagine that throughout your day, different hormones signal different types of hunger. And instead of having them signal different types of hunger at other times, they just all go off at once every time you open up a bit of food.
And how devastating is this for the 400-year-old who's sitting next to the 150-year-old?
Pound.
Yeah, 150 pound. 400 pound, 150 pound.
Right.
And that person's eating 5 times as much as them. They're literally starving themselves. They're gaining weight. And this person on the other side is losing weight. It's got to be maddening.
Absolutely. I'm only using myself anecdotally. I am not a science experiment, but just from my own personal life, I knew going into my own weight loss that I was going to offset myself permanently, calorically, and my offset is only about 100 or 200 calories right now. So at my weight, I knew this was going to happen. I'm like a year and a half in, And my roommates, they eat so much more than I do in a sitting, and they're all very fit, and you know they're smaller. So yeah, this is the new you permanently, basically. And some of these contestants, when they talk about the kind of hunger, what that does to you when you have multiple hormones go off at once, telling you to eat, they talk about there's no such thing as cheating for them. One of them said that when they open up a bag of food or something, the word blackout and starvation, they're just words. Until you have literally every hormone in your body that's capable of feeling hunger going off at the same time, we're built to starve for periods. That's what fasting is, and our bodies.
We're supposed to be hungry at times.
Right? Yeah, we're built to be hungry from time to time. That does not, in words, cover what these people go through. So, knowing that you only need 1,700 calories a day just to maintain your fat weight, that's not a living situation. That's a curse. That's a level in, you know, Dante's Inferno. The 14th century Italians would have looked at this research and said, "You're going too far with the torture here." So, having said that, I want to get back a little bit to Matt's struggle, if you would. Tell us how he went through this loss, if you don't mind.
Well, Matt, I resonated him right away because I did jiu-jitsu for some years, and he's a Division I Iowa wrestler. So that is a primo program. So when I said I saw him on the treadmill and he moves like a world-class athlete, world-class athletes have kind of a bounce, no matter how heavy they are, how old they are, they have a way of moving that shows they're athletic, kind of like a dancer's. They always have that dancer's grace. Seeing him on the show resonated with me because he was from Seattle. He cried the whole time. They always cry in the beginning when the diet really kicks in, because they miss food, they miss that relationship, that comfort. It's like a divorce. It's like a drug addict or alcoholic going without their drug.
So it's like a loss.
Oh, huge, yeah. He really started coming out of his skin. He was more vocal. He talked about his problems with drinking, and I knew why he resonated with me a lot was because wrestlers at Division I level have been working and exercising their whole lives, and they have to control their weight to make weight, to wrestle, to be successful, to win tournaments, to win state, to go to college, get scholarships. So I know it wasn't because he was lazy.
Okay, so when most people fail to lose weight, we fully blame willpower. I mean, almost like categorically, our go-to as a society is say they lack willpower. So this guy has proven time and again he has it. He has willpower. Yeah,
and then you see there was another one. There's an NFL quarterback on there called Scott Mitchell, and I remember him, and he was a 6'5" trim cannon for an arm quarterback. So you see these guys, and you feel bad. You're like, well, how did they let themselves go? And of course, they show the pictures of them with a six-pack in college, and so that makes it even harder. You're like, this is not who that person is. We want them to turn back to the old self, the successful, younger, healthier self.
Right. And we'll hold it against them if they can't turn it back.
The uncomfortable for me about seeing them, and you know me, I'm an extrovert. I go talk to anybody. I have no... And I wanted to tell them what a big fan I was, how impressed I was by them. But inside, you felt like you should ask, what happened? Are you okay? You gained the weight back.
Right. And you realizing that that's probably going through his head too whenever he sees the recognition from a fan.
That our stars lit up in our eyes, yeah. So that's got to hurt him every single time.
Absolutely.
He's reminded in the mirror. He lives it every second of every day. So.
Right. And it'd be nice culturally if we could just sort of accept when somebody fails and that they've changed their life and that it swung back and that they did everything they could. But I don't think we can. Like, as a society, I really wonder about that.
Happily ever after.
Yeah. And if you don't get happily ever after, we will blame you. Like, you remind us that we can't do it
Yeah,
either.
like I'm perfect, right? Like I haven't regressed in things too.
Right.
Just every area of my life's regressed. I just wasn't on TV talking about it.
Yeah, all my regressions happen in the dark where I can hide it, but the poor guy's in the spotlight. Well, this is really just a perfect setup for our next section, because we're going to talk about fat shaming. This is a huge part of our culture. I mean, like much more than I gave it credit for before getting into the research. So we want to talk about what fat shaming actually does and why it doesn't really help. So, have you seen the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Yeah, it's a hilarious show. Inappropriate, always.
Oh, right. There's a actor on there that famously lost a lot of weight. Rob McElhenney.
I didn't know that.
There's early season of him, and he's got like this crazy big beer gut and a beard, and he I think intentionally, well, not intentionally, but the show is like plays up how much he looks like a slob. And then some part in the show, he lost a ton of weight and got in crazy good shape. I mean, there's all these pictures online of him being like ripped and cut and looking amazing. But somebody there's all these like Twitter accounts where people lose weight and they get in really good shape, and they say, oh, it's just diet and exercise. If I can do it, anyone can do it. This guy, because he's a cut up and he's hilarious. I want to read you his tweet real quick. So this is from Rob McElhenney's Twitter account. He says, "Look, it's not that hard. All you need to do is lift weights 6 days a week, stop drinking alcohol, don't eat anything after 7 p.m., don't eat carbs or sugars at all. In fact, don't eat anything you like. Get a personal trainer like Magic Mike, sleep 9 hours a night, run 3 miles a day, have a studio, pay for the whole thing over 6 to 7 month span. I don't know why anyone's not doing this. It's super realistic lifestyle and an appropriate body image to compare yourself to."
Hashtag truth.
Right, hashtag truth. Yeah, I when I saw that, I saw that a couple of years ago, and I was just like, that's a perfect. That is really like he's making a joke, but that really is how we look at it, like America. There was a period of time where Michelle Obama had a campaign going. She started a campaign to limit the advertising of fast foods, and it was to sort of to get them to stop advertising to kids and to get people to. She was tackling obesity, like she was trying to solve obesity. And supposedly, fast food chains started paying into their campaign coffers, and her message switched very quickly from food and food limiting and advertising limiting, and it 180'd it. It switched to exercise, focus on exercise. And I remember reading a researcher come out publicly, and he was like, "Yeah, do you know you would have to bicycle 7 hours a day to get rid of like a McDonald's meal and like a 2 liter of Coke or something like that?" So our focus, we're talking fat shaming for this section and how it works and what it really does to somebody. Really, when you look at it, you're not going to win by exercising your way out of obesity. It really comes down to diet control, environment, and long-term planning. And like we said before, self-awareness. Todd, you said you basically worked out like a crazy person and gave yourself injuries, right?
But at the time I had an income that allowed me a lot of massages, the right kind of food. I had a lot, and that's what we talked about a lot about The Biggest Losers. You're in an environment that's not real life realistic.
They quite literally strand them on a ranch with trainers.
And they do, and have the best doctors in the world. Someone, unless you were LeBron James or a professional athlete, Tom Brady, could afford that.
Right. My weight loss is nothing compared to these Biggest Losers, and still I'm living in an affluent area. I've got doctors. I mentioned up top that I was seeing doctors. I've got no dependents. I'll state that. My income is my own resource. So. So we're going to go through these real quick. We're going to go down the factors for obesity, which statistically mean you're more likely to be obese if you have these things in your life. So before we start shaming people, we're first going to look at what has to go right for you to consider meaningful weight loss over a long time. So factors for obesity include poverty. Why poverty? Why is poverty something that might make you obese?
Healthier food costs 5 times as much. Go to Whole Foods.
Bingo.
Besides Walmart.
Yeah.
Look at the people at Walmart and then Whole Foods.
Right. where we're living at a very strange time in human history where the most calorically dense foods are the cheapest. That's never happened before. I watched a YouTube video once where it was showing serfs, like medieval serfs, the peasants. Their diets were like whole grains and fish, because
No wonder they're fit, right?
right, exactly. So we're living at an unprecedented time where the most calorically dense food is $1 from McDonald's, and the best food for you that is low calorie and fibrous is expensive. It's Whole Foods. Another one is healthcare access. So we're just talking doctors, insurance. We're broadcasting in the middle of a COVID epidemic where so many people are lacking health insurance. So that is definitely going to be a factor in obesity, because first, you need regular checkups. Like while you're losing weight, literally you can't change your physiology without risking. So you need checkups. Education. Why do you think education might be a factor in obesity?
Just people setting a good example of what a healthy diet is.
Right.
I think education more from the family.
I think you're right. I think it's family and diet. Okay, so for instance, almonds naturally have an appetite suppressant in them. So does coffee. I didn't know that until I started reading about it. And your average hard studying, book learning kid isn't going to know that, even if they study all day for other things. You really have to have a nutritionist or a lot of time to look things up. So generally, educated populations will have more exposure to the information they need to continue losing weight. I remember when I was younger, my grandmother told me that Chinese food is healthy for you because it comes from an older culture that knows a lot. And then when I grew up, it's like, no, it's not. It's
sweet and sour pork.
Sweet and sour pork, yeah.
Unhealthy thing in the world.
High calorie chicken with glazes and fried. Yeah, fried food is healthy, right, Grandma? But
food.
It's nothing against her. She checking off this list: poverty, healthcare, education. About half of these things she did not have access to. So now we get to a couple that we can't really control: genetics and hormones. We already talked about that. Some people, I know there's a large amount of people online who hate fat people. We're going to get into those folks specifically pretty soon. And they say that genetics is a poor excuse for being overweight. We're not talking when somebody says, I'm genetically, like I'm big boned or I'm predisposed to being fat. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about you have a set of hormones that signal you to eat more often and in larger amounts. Whether that came from you eating improperly early in your age, or because you have a hormone imbalance that tells you to eat more regularly. So we're not going with the I was born obese or big bone. We actually are talking real science here. We're talking hormones. And then, of course, chronic illness. There are a whole host of chronic illnesses that will make you not burn as many calories in a day.
Not process food like other people do.
Yeah, you don't process food properly. You retain weight. So when we talk about losing weight, it's less of a question of, did you do the one thing right that we told you to do, fatty? It's you don't listen to people who say, just don't eat the bad foods. It's more about you have to have everything go right for you. All 5 of those subjects we just mentioned, you have to have those in your pocket already. Or like that tweet said, you have to have the time, the money, the availability, the diet, and the training, and all that has to click for you to lose weight. So that's a privileged position. So fat hate is a real thing. Have you ever been onto fat-shaming websites?
Never, no.
Okay.
I just see the backlash when people attack someone that's been fat-shamed, with a celebrity or something.
Yeah. I pulled most of these facts. The above facts, the ones about risks for obesity, that came from healthline.com. We're going U of M Health for our fat shaming, and some of our facts online just come from Reddit. Because if you spend more than 20 minutes online, it's very, very easy to find fat hate groups. There are whole YouTube channels devoted toward fat hate. They don't soften that either. They don't say that their channel is called, fat productivity or weight loss or something. They really literally call these sections fat hate.
That's sad. What kind of human being could feel good about themselves setting something like that up?
So I'm so glad you asked that question, because I had to have the same thought. Like, who would spend time hating fat people online? And they say it's because they're trying to shame fat people into weight loss. That if we shame them enough, they'll realize that they're in error and that they haven't put in the work.
They're helping people.
They're helping people. But, well, one, we know that just isn't the case.
They're just being cruel.
It's cruelty, and it's also it increases risks of suicide, risks of depression, and it also increases the risk that they will overeat. So for one thing, fat hate does not help anybody. But I'm going to quote, this guy is not an expert, he's not a doctor, Jason Pargin, a guy that writes for crack.com. He wrote books like John Dies in the End. So he's a New York Times bestseller. So he's a fun fiction author. But something I love, I heard him in a talk once. He said that hate is pretty easy. People that start hate groups or join hate groups or fall into them, they're doing it because if you are hating somebody of another race, or if you're hating fat people and you're yourself not fat, then all you have to do is wake up in the morning and you've already accomplished something. As long as, if I'm a skinny guy, if I wake up, then I already have accomplished something by not being fat, so I can feel free to get online and congratulate myself and hate another group of people. And we had another episode.
Pretty pathetic, right?
It is. There's also something called outrage addiction. Where it feels good. Wired has a great article about this. It feels good, and it actually hits dopamine and a couple other hormones to feel outraged, but to feel morally outraged. If you're in the moral right, it feels really good to be mad at somebody. So that's really what fat hatred is doing. People feel morally justified because they think they're helping you in some way, and they feel good about doing it because it means that they did something right in their life by not being fat. So if we think of it that way, that we're, again, we started this episode saying we were going to look at what happened with Matt and Susie, and we were going to figure out why in a more scientific, more open-minded way. So tell us about when things were going great for Matt, because it feels to me like where we are at so far, he's gone on The Biggest Loser. He lost the weight. He cried a lot, which I enjoy that. I think it's good that he was emotionally in touch. Where was his peak?
Well, let's recap here with Matt. So he not only does he win this show, he's on national TV. He looks like a supermodel. The guy's slimmed down. He looks great. He meets the woman of his life. He's getting married. And he gets $250,000. So I don't know.
That's like the end of the Karate Kid. Like here's the love of your life. Here's a trophy. Here's some money.
So now he's on tour with her. They're going around. They're promoting the show. They're promoting themselves. Mm-hmm. He proposes to her in New York City on a daytime talk show, right down in Manhattan. Everyone's cheering on the streets. She, of course, says yes. Doing some study research for the show, I looked at a lot of interviews with Susie, and she had something funny. They're getting married. They're planning the wedding. She is very insecure about the excess skin, to the point that she says this. I found this very interesting. She was more insecure with this extra skin than she ever was being so obese.
Oh, so what? To clarify, what's the extra skin come from?
From so much weight loss that's been covered around those extra pounds. Now that that's gone, the skin just sags, so it's not very flattering, and it will hang underneath the arm and in her stomach and stuff. So there's a lot of scarring and stretch marks from just losing that much weight that fast.
Okay. Does that skin, that doesn't like absorb back in or something?
No, it doesn't. It has to be surgically removed.
Oh, wow.
So they took her through. I watched a couple of her interviews, and she goes to the physician for the surgery, It was a 10-hour surgery, and they removed 8 pounds of skin.
Oh, wow. So it's just human leather, basically.
Yeah. So, and she was traumatized the whole time. She's like, "Why am I doing this?" She was screaming, crying before she went in for surgery. I just thought the thing was she was more insecure after the weight loss than she was before, because we've studied that on some of our other episodes.
Right. That's wild.
She had the surgery. She looks amazing. You see her in this white wedding dress. And something I thought was really strange, they have the video for the wedding, and I'm watching that. They brought to their own wedding 2 cardboard cutouts of when they were twice as heavy as they are now. And they held them up on stage while they were getting married. And I'm thinking, when does the publicity stop and we just enjoy the wedding?
Right. This is going to be crude, but do you think those cardboard cutouts were watching during the wedding night?
You're being creepy.
It's like, well, I mean, watching your past selves watching
Exactly.
you during the wedding, during the meal, during...
It's just like, we get it, guys. We get it.
Yeah.
You're skinny.
It's good for them. That's all I'll say. Like, whatever they want to do, even if it gets strange. If they brought their own fat in jars and put them up on the wedding table instead of a cake, whatever. Do what you want at that point.
They look great. They're having a great time.
Exactly. Good for them. So now we kind of want to get into practical parts. We started this podcast saying that we are going to get into how do you do weight loss in a meaningful way.
What works?
What works? So 2 things that came up during these articles. Rearranging your life, basically structure, and retraining your taste buds. We're talking like eating times and schedules, intermittent fasting, recognizing that you won't have a normal human metabolism anymore if you lose weight too quick, too much. And that's a choice people are going to have to make. Like you really are going to have to decide how fast do you want weight loss versus how much you want to alter your metabolism permanently. And just for a few little anecdotes, I want to share that metabolism, resting burn rate is really the key to this. When we say that these contestants, their resting burn rate lowered, their metabolism, they don't require as many calories in a day, that all comes down to resting burn rate. That's the absolute key to this. Now, things you do in your life can change your resting burn rate naturally. We're going to cover a few of these. Something Todd sent to me when we started this. He sent me an article about how chess champions can burn up to 6,000 calories a day while playing in tournaments. And historically, they lose between 10 and 20 pounds during a championship.
That's just thinking. That's not playing basketball or football or running a marathon.
Right. Those chess chairs, they don't have like they don't have spin class while they're playing chess. Yeah. They are sitting there thinking as hard as a human can think. And I put this one in here to make myself feel better. Writers during fierce concentration burn an extra 60 to 100 calories per hour during intense focus. And I gotta say, I was hoping it was going to be a lot higher. Like when I read the chess thing, I'm like, oh man, how much do writers burn? And then I looked it up, and it wasn't that big.
That's still not bad.
It's still more than just watching TV. Aaron Egbert. So we talk about season 8, the Biggest Loser, who of all of them, like 14 out of 15 or 15 out of 16 gained the weight back. One contestant kept the weight off. And that's over several seasons. So that's even skewed by she's the only one in multiple seasons that kept the weight off. When asked how she did it, she said she didn't change. She burns 550 fewer calories per day than somebody of her size. So she didn't get off scot-free. She didn't beat the system somehow. What she does is she is a full-time caregiver for her ailing mother, and she says she struggles. That it is really a struggle. It's still for her. She talks about how if she starts eating a treat, it will become 3 or 4 treats because those hormones kick in. They tell her she's dying, and so she eats. So she does environment control. She said that she's caring for her mother, so she has strict control over what happens around her. Resting burn rate we've talked about is key. 65 to 80% of the calories burned are at metabolic base. So I'm gonna say that again. 65 to 80% of the calories you burn are that resting rate. The bulk of your daily calories burned are when you are just idling like a car. Only about 10 to 30% is burned during exercise.
So it isn't when you're walking on the Stairmaster at the gym or this. A good majority of it is you're steady during the day.
That's your steady rate, yeah. So Todd, when you were going to the gym real heavy, how many hours a day were you going?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. And it probably felt like you were burning a lot more than 30% of your day in that, or 10 to 30, right?
Absolutely. The sweat was flying. It says how many calories you burned, and
right.
No pain, no gain. And
yeah, it feels like 95% of your calories burned are during sweat and during heavy work.
And you think that you're burning off all that stuff, that crap you ate. You do.
I used to eat, when I was going to the gym, I would be on a treadmill or something, and it would show the calorie burn, and I'd nudge my friends and be like, I just ran a burger away. But it really is closer to, I mean, even if you're peaking out, if you're really burning heavy and you're going multiple hours a day, you're still only really getting up to about 30% of your burn rate at a very high amount. But for most people, it's 80% of your calories are burned at metabolic base. Resting burn rate, and that's why that's why all of these biggest losers who gain the weight back, it's their resting rate that changed, and that's the curse part we've talked about. So we also talked briefly about appetite suppressing foods. So again, I'm going to ask you, Todd, what did you change in your environment and in your sort of like self-control, like your immediate environment? How did you lose and keep the weight off?
I did a really practical approach by hanging out with people that I wanted to look like, who were my age and my size.
Okay.
A similar type. And so I would eat what they ate. I would hang around with them. I made them my workout partners. I made that my social circle. So that's how I created it. I didn't know I was doing it, but that's what I did.
Oh, okay. So not only did your environment change, your social environment changed. You're not sitting with people who are going to eat a giant nacho platter. You're hanging out with people who are going to not look at you weird when they eat carrots for a snack.
And at 50 pounds, I lost that in probably a little too fast, probably 6 months. And one day I was at the gym, and this one of the sales counselors who sells memberships there, he said, "Oh, hi, Mr. Laments." And I didn't understand how he knew my name and how he pronounced it perfect. Mm-hmm. And I go, "How do you know who I am?" And he goes, "Oh, everyone knows who you are." And I said, "That's weird." And so I pressed him a little more. I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, when we sign people up for new memberships, we show them a picture when you signed up here when you were heavier, and then we point you out in the gym."
Oh.
And I was surprised. So I was part of their sales process. Like, hey, if you work out here, you're going to lose. You can look like this. Not like him, but a letter U.
Yeah. I don't know why I imagine this, but I was just like, I would love it if they pointed you out while you were like laughing or goofing off, or like or just like doing something that would embarrass the gym. That's what I would do. Every time they pointed at me, I would be like cursing at a water dispenser or something, hitting a vending machine.
So I was, of course, flattered.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So environmental changes are very important. Investigate your food. I can't stress that enough. For me personally, that made the biggest changes for me.
Education. Self-education.
Yes. Turn every label around. Look at everything you eat, and then look up online to see if there are better versions of it. I mean, literally for everything. Like the basest, smallest, granular thing you can find in your kitchen. Find out if there's a better version of it. Natural appetite suppressants are good. Almonds, water, yogurt, avocados, eggs, spices, legumes. Just look for things that have more fibrous versions of them. And reach out to that education. There's no podcast that will have enough time to just name everything you should be eating. Just get used to being a food investigator, I think is the best way to do it. And finally, there's no shame in looking into surgery. If you can't keep the weight off, We're going to talk about their success rate really quick here, but bariatric surgery is the one that people turn to the most. Actually, Todd was telling me about a more rudimentary surgery. What were you talking about?
Well, in the 80s, it was not an uncommon surgery, and I know two people in my life that would have their jaw wired shut for months, and all you could do is drink liquids through a straw.
80s?
Yeah, so you couldn't talk. I mean, it's barbaric, and people used to do it because that's how they just couldn't they couldn't be disciplined, they couldn't take the temptation.
Okay. Wait, I sounded shocked. When you first told me this, I thought you were talking about like the 1700s or something. I was ancient history.
The hairbands around, yeah.
Did the jaw wiring work? I mean, did they keep it off?
They look great, and then they gain it back once it's unwired. But I just can't. Can you imagine people going to that now?
Well, I was about to say no, but then I was like, well, if I hadn't educated myself or started looking into things, yeah, I could totally see getting desperate enough. It would hurt, but yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah. And that's what we're saying is if for health reasons you don't have the environment control, if you've tried over and over to lose weight, it didn't work. If educating yourself didn't work, I really do believe education and self-awareness works. But there's no shame in looking into bariatric surgery. It so far seems to have the best success rate that I could find. Success, according to the University of Iowa, their success rate is defined as 50% or more loss of excess body weight maintained for 5 or more years. Most studies show that the success rates for bariatric surgery are pretty good within the first 2 to 5 years. So your first 2 to 5 years, you lose about 50% of your body weight, or up to. This gets less successful over time. Again, like with most weight loss, it's temporary unless you have really good environment control and really good discipline and education. After about 12 years, this drops down to about a 70% failure or, quote, recidivism rate. But documentation also gets murky after 12 years because you have people who stop responding to surveys. And when people feel ashamed about their weight, if they've regained the weight, they don't want to fill out a survey saying they failed. So again, studies even for something like a surgery, we should have data on that kind of stuff. And it does really sort of get muddied and skewed. But the definitions for success get blurry as well. So really, when you start looking into surgery, you're going to have to define your own success. You're going to have to look at what would work for you, what would be an acceptable risk for failure, and what an acceptable amount of loss is, and decide for yourself, ultimately.
Well, Joe, I got to ask you, you've lost 80 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel different?
You mentioned the age of somebody on the inside, that their organs and the weight they carry, how it adjusts them. I feel like as I've lost weight and gotten smarter about exercise and smarter about sleep, you're hearing me say a lot of things about my environment and lifestyle, not so much about weight loss and calorie control. It's because that's been the biggest factor, is environment and life control. And it feels like I've been moving back in time. Like physically, it feels like like everybody, when you interview somebody about weight loss, they say energy. That's not the word for it. The word for it is really just your body starts to react younger and you start moving differently. I think that's the best way to put it.
Well put.
And you, how did you feel after losing?
It's been a struggle. So I've had ups and downs.
Okay.
I think it's been so long now that I forgot how much better I feel.
Oh, okay.
I definitely feel and look younger than my age.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely worth it. Wouldn't you say it's worth it?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm going to give people a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. When we started researching this episode, we just had it on our document because it was going to be interesting, but it's also, we had it listed because Todd and I had both lost a little bit of weight. But we got into the research, and this turned into such a much better message than we anticipated. So,
And I think it's what happens when you do have the big loss weight. You get all these people cheering you on, and what the message is: keep going, go faster, go faster. You're losing a pound a day, and you think that's great. But losing a pound a month or 2 pounds a month is better than losing 2 pounds a day. I promise.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you said that. I forgot to mention the rate. But yeah, about 2 pounds a month is what you want to aim for.
And you'll get there, and you'll stay there. It'll be worth it.
Yes. You won't have as drastic of a caloric offset as these Biggest Losers. Lose at a slow rate as doctors recommend. And you'll be able to keep it off with environment control and awareness. So speaking of gaining the weight back, how much did Matt and Susie gain back?
Susie gained back like 50 pounds, and Matt gained back a lot more. They look very heavy. Not as big as they were, but still very, very heavy. Not like where they were when they won the show. Not even close.
Okay.
But their life seems great. They have 2 beautiful children together. They're still married. Most of these reality TV romances don't last more than 6 months.
So this is not the Bachelorette or something. It's not just
No.
They're done as soon as they're out. They stuck together.
They got a loving working relationship with kids. They actually started their own diet plan, and they've had some monetary success. The system's called Body Evolution, and it's called, believe it or not, How to Lose Weight and Keep It Off.
Oh, that's good. I mean, they did keep off a significant amount of what they lost. They ballooned back up to a portion of what they had. So that's we'll take a partial success.
If we could do that all of our life, we'll be all right.
Yeah, I think that's a very good message.
As a champion wrestler, Matt knew about weight loss. And if anyone had the willpower and the monetary incentive to keep the weight off, it was Matt. So why is obesity, recidivism, such a problem? Well, as we discovered today, it all comes down to resting metabolism, how drastically you lose the weight, and how hard your body fights to get it back. If you're obese or just a little overweight, we don't want you to walk away today feeling hopeless. You can improve your life. You can improve your health. You can make lasting change. But you have to go into it knowing that drastic weight loss is a permanent change, one that will require you to have an understanding of your body, your hormones, and your environment at home. Shame does not work. Exercise alone does not work. Calorie counting and temporary dieting does not work. Consistent, thoughtful effort and realistic expectations seem to be the biggest factor between the obese 98% who gain it back and the 2% that defy the odds. In the end, our best bet might be to wait for science to develop a true healthy appetite suppressant. But until then, we at the Reengineered You believe you can make this mindful, healthy choice every day. You've been listening to the Reengineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.reengineeredyou.com. That's re-engineeredyou.com, where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for every episode. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debate.
We're not experts at anything, but we've got an opinion on everything. And I think Joe's going to read one of our 5-star iTunes reviews.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of opinions, this one comes from Joe Sports 1.
And just for the record, we like positive feedback, by the way.
Oh no, I want to get dragged. So bring it. No, we do. We're gonna read the 5-star reviews. We will chuckle at the 1-star reviews, but we're not gonna read them. So this one comes from Joe Sports 1. He says, "Great podcast. This is such a smart and well thought out podcast. This is the type of show that can benefit so many people. I highly recommend it. Thank you, Joe Sports One.
Yeah, thank you, Joe Sports One. Very cool. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. And if you'd like us to read your review, give us 5 stars. And if you want us to argue with you, give us 1 star. That'll be fun.